Today we are going to talk about Azure Container Apps. This video is in Security Specialist series. So of course, we will gonna talk about how to secure Azure Container Apps. But for the people who are coming to this channel first time, they have not seen all hundreds of videos that we have created. So for them, we first introduce a little bit about Azure Container Apps, then we'll start securing it. So let's get started. So very first thing is we need to understand what Azure Container App is and what problem it actually solves. Okay. So we need to understand this. It is a managed service. It is a managed service, which means it is a PaaS service managed by Microsoft, all their infrastructure. You only need to create your Docker image and use that, run it on that container app service. And it is also serverless. Okay. Serverless container service, this is what it is. It allows developers to deploy and scale modern applications packaged as container. That's why it's Azure Container Apps. Without needing to manage the underlying infrastructure such as virtual machine or Kubernetes. And why it's serverless? Because whenever we create any service like app service, which is also managed service, but we create app service plan, which means we select these queues, the server at the back end. But here we don't do that. It's all automatically. You only need to use, you only need to have your image with you and you can run it. And whatever server compute is needed, it will taken care by themselves, like by the service. That's why it's a serverless and everything is managed by Microsoft like infrastructure. So it is managed service. All right. So then question comes, why do we need it? All right. Why do we need it? Well, let's go to the initiation of the container technology, which is revolutionized how developers package and deploy applications, ensuring consistency across different environments and simplifying configuration management. However, managing the infrastructure for containers, especially when it's thousands of them or hundreds of them, which means orchestrators like Kubernetes, can be complex and resource intensive. But Azure Container Apps abstract away this complexity, allowing developers to focus solely on building and scaling application. Yes, you can deploy microservices through Azure Container Apps as well. All right, let's see some features, some key features of Azure Container Apps, and then we'll straight away go ahead and secure it. So as we talked about serverless containers, so it provides the auto scaling, okay, auto scaling. In response to what? In response to like HTTP traffic or events or custom metrics and scaling down to zero when not in use, okay? And which parameter or which feature you think it's impacting? Well, if you're thinking cost, then you are right because only you're getting charged for the time being it is used. And since it's auto scale, so you can easily understand. You pay only for the resource, CPU and memory consumed by your containers. And when it's not in use, so your auto scaling will take care of that. And moreover, it's a serverless, so cost efficiency. Then there is something, because we were talking about auto scaling, there is something also called event driven architecture. Kubernetes event driven architecture, KIDA. Uh, it has a built-in support for this Kubernetes event-driven auto-scaling and enabling containers to scale based on a wide range of event sources such as event hubs or service bus or custom metrics will help you uh, build this scaling. It has this KIDA integration. And if you're wondering what is KIDA, KIDA is an open source component that enables Kubernetes to scale applications based on the number of events or custom metrics. It allows application to automatically scale up and down in response to various types of events. So it is event based action, such as messages in the queue or HTTP request or custom defined matrices, those things. Then, or if you like, I think for some example, let's imagine you have an application that process messages from an service bus or Azure service bus queue. When the number of messages in the queue increases, you want your application to scale out to handle the load. Conversely, when there are fewer messages, you want to scale down to save the resources. The same functionality of auto scaling on the basis of events. Okay, cool. So that's there. Now it has something called Dapper integration as well, which is something which will help you create your microservices and application architecture. So it has a native support for Dapper runtime, DAPR, which is distributed application runtime, which simplifies the development of microservices with features like service invocation, state management, pub/sub messaging, and many more. So if you're wondering what exactly it is, it's a portable event driven runtime that simplifies building microservices. It provides building blocks for common microservices patterns such as service invocation, state management, pub/sub messaging, and many more. All right. So that's there in this Azure Container apps. It has so many wonderful features, and if people know how to actually utilize this particular service, it will definitely blow the mind. So it also has supports both HTTP and TCPS ingress, providing flexibility in how services are exposed and interacted with. So ingress has both for HTTP and TCP. Okay. Then uh, one more thing, this ACA, I think I have mentioned or not, but would like to mention again. It leverages Kubernetes for container orchestration without requiring direct management of Kubernetes cluster. Yes, it is running on the Kubernetes cluster. Under the hood, it's Kubernetes. So, uh, okay, what else that we should think for? Yeah, it also has custom domains and certificate, supports custom domain names and SSL certificates, making it easy to secure and brand your application. So custom domains, just like we have in app services. Okay, then it has a direct integration with the CI/CD, Azure DevOps as well. We have built-in monitoring system like Azure Monitor, and because it is a part of Azure services, so of course you have Azure AD there, and you can apply Azure RBAC, which is one of the feature of security that we should imply. And it also comes with internal service discovery feature, which enables easy service to service communication within the same environment, supporting scalable microservices architecture. So we can say service discovery. If you're wondering what exactly it is, if you're new with this, well, service discovery is a mechanism that allows services to find and communicate with each other dynamically. It helps in managing service endpoints and ensures that service can locate each other without hard coding the address. For example, in a microservice application, the order service needs to communicate with the payment service. Instead of hard coding the payment service address, the order service uses service discovery to find out the current address of the payment service. In Kubernetes, it happens through the internal DNS. Anyways, so yeah, that's there. Now, uh, these are some features and this is what it is that we talked about. Now let's see what are some advantage of using Azure Container apps. Okay, so what could be the advantage of using this? Well, the very first thing is it because it has again abstract the Kubernetes, abstract another layer. So it is a simplified Kubernetes experience, we could say. So provide the benefits of Kubernetes without the operational overhead of managing the cluster. If you are deploying the microservices, if you're using for that purpose. And then it has serverless scaling. Okay. So What it will do, it will combine this will definitely help the cost. We talked about it at the beginning. And it is microservice friendly. Okay. So it will help you design with the microservice architecture in mind. You can utilize ACA, and it has seamless integration with the Azure services because it is itself is an Azure service. So seamless integration with Azure services. All right. And now, if we talk about some use cases, what could be some use cases for ACA? Well, we talked about microservice many times. So deploy microservices that need to communicate with each other efficiently and scale independently and without overhead of managing the Kubernetes. So microservice apps. If you have want to deploy microservice application, you could think for Azure Container Apps. If you're planning for event driven processing, you can think for Azure Container Apps. Okay, because we talked about Kida, right? It has a built-in integration with that. Now you can utilize Azure Container Apps for your web apps and APIs as well. So we can say web apps and APIs. And now, because it is a serverless and you could utilize that feature by running your certain processes like batch processing. Like, so you could utilize this for batch processing as well. Execute background jobs and batch processing tasks that need to scale based on demand. So batch processing. These are some use cases I just mentioned here for the people to make a grasp of it so that when we talked about the security, they could easily relate what exactly we are doing. So in a nutshell, this is a PaaS service. We are utilizing our container image, running here and running our application. If we have multiple microservices, we can also work as an integrated microservices application architecture. Now it's time to secure it. It's time to secure it. So let's secure it. All right. So what are the things that we could utilize to secure our ACA or Azure Container Apps? Just like any other services we talked about, we start with the identity. We should apply identity best practices wherever possible, like least privileged principle, like managed identities, like RBAC. Okay. So let's start making our notes. Managed identities. So you got to use the managed identities, utilize Azure managed identities to handle Azure service authentication from your container apps. Managed identities eliminate the need to manage credentials in your code. So what how it will help us? It will reduce the risk of credential leaks because there are no credentials anymore. It's managed and it can authenticate through Azure AD, and there you go. So configure a managed identity for your ACA or Azure Container Apps to automatically authenticate to Azure services like Azure Blob Storage or Azure SQL Database without storing any credentials in your code or configuration file. Uh, then we can also use Azure RBAC when we use it as a service and follow least privileged principle. Pardon my spelling. My focus is on topic. All right. Then what else we can think for? Well, we because it's working on image Docker images, so we should have something which will scan and secure your images. All right, so what can you think for? Well, MS Defender for container apps. Yes. This Microsoft Defender offers extended protection against threats like malicious images, runtime threats, and other vulnerabilities, and it will regularly scan your images. So you should go ahead and opt for it. It's there, cloud native. Then we should because this Azure Container Apps we can have it on our virtual network. So we should have our network isolation, which means leverage Azure Virtual Network or private endpoints to isolate network traffic to and from our Azure Container apps. Isolating network traffic helps protect against network based threats and unauthorized data access. And finally, reduce the blast radius as well. All right. So again, we were talking about the container image. I think we mentioned MS Defender for apps for various things. Like we mentioned malicious images, runtime threats, and other vulnerabilities. But we should use trusted base images and scan images for vulnerabilities before deployment all the time. So we need to secure the container images. Well, ensuring that the images are free from vulnerabilities at outset reduce the risk of deploying exploitable containers. So use official images from verified publishers and implement CI/CD pipelines with integrated security scanning tools like Aqua Security, or there are so many other security available third-party tools or extension that you could utilize in your CI/CD. So go for it. Then we should restrict container privileges. So that's another point. We have already covered this in our previous video. This is the same thing because that was also depending upon the containers or pods. So restrict we need to restrict the container privileges. So we need to run the containers with the least privilege necessary. Minimizing privileges can help prevent privilege escalation attacks if an application is compromised. So avoid running containers as root. Specify non-root user in your Docker file. Then we should have something for continuous monitoring, or rather security monitoring first. Monitor the runtime behavior of containers using Azure Monitor and Azure Container Insights. Continuous monitoring allows you to detect and respond to anomalies and security incident in real time. So we can say continuous monitoring. Okay. Then we should have RBAC. We talked about Azure policies. Azure policies to control who can access and manage your container apps, or with certain criteria that needs to be followed. So utilize Azure policies for the governance purpose. Fine-grained access control, prevent unauthorized access and change to your container environment. You can have those kind of policies as well, though that falls in the RBAC. But we're talking about the governance Azure policies have. All right, then we can have another thing, which is HTTPS. Enable HTTPS to secure the communication between clients and your container applications, which is use encrypted traffic, encryption in traffic, which is HTTPS. Encrypting traffic prevents interception and unauthorized disclosure of transmitted data. Then we should always remember and keep patched our images. So update and patch regularly. Okay. Keep your container application dependencies up to date. Regular updates and patches protect against vulnerabilities in software and dependencies. And automate the update process in your CI/CD pipeline to ensure that your containers are always running the least or the latest version of the software with all security patches applied. Okay. And we can think for use private repository. Okay. Why? Because containers are built from images, we all know that are stored in one or more repositories, and these repositories can belong to a public or private. Public like Docker Hub, and private like Azure Container Registry or Docker Trusted Registry. Okay, a publicly available container image does not guarantee security. Container images consist of multiple software layers, and each software layer might have vulnerabilities. So you should have the trusted. Okay, so to help reduce the threat of attacks, you should store and retrieve images from the trusted private registry, such as Azure Container Registry or Docker Trusted Registry. In addition to providing a managed private registry, Azure Container Registry, It also supports other kind of authentications like Microsoft Enter ID with all those RBAC and thing we talked about. So it has additional security as well, where you can apply the least privilege principle and RBAC through pull and push only those permission that nobody can by mistake do some kind of uh, create some kind of vulnerabilities. Okay, so you need to ensure the integrity of images throughout the life cycle. Okay, where from the creation to the deletion to the update, everything you need to have a proper, and you need to reduce the container attack surface by removing unneeded privileges. We already talked about it, because you can also minimize the potential attack surface by removing any unused or unnecessary processor privilege from container runtime. We talked about it already. If I missed anything, yeah, we can have pre-approved files and executables that the container is allowed to run, which is a wonderful point. We should mention it here. Pre-approve files and executables that container is allowed, like reducing the number of variables or unknowns helps you maintain a stable, reliable environment. Limiting containers so they can access or run only pre-approved or safe listed files and executables is a wonderful or a proven method of limiting exposure to risk. We talked about the network segmentation. We talked about monitoring. I think we have enough good points, like 12 points we have managed to write down to secure our Azure Container Apps. So in this video, if we have to summarize, we talked about what is Azure Container App, what are the different features it offers, and what are the advantage we get, and what are the use cases, just to understand the feel of this particular service. And now we talked about in the end, which was the main agenda of this video, how to protect our Azure container applications. And that's all about it. I hope it was informative for you guys, and thank you for watching. You guys have a wonderful day. Bye bye.